November 23, 1944. Dawn. Hill 260, Leyte, Philippines. The rain hammered down in sheets that turned the volcanic soil into black mud. Through the pre-dawn darkness, Japanese voices echoed across the ridgeline as Imperial Army soldiers prepared their assault. Private First Class Leonard Funk crouched in a water-filled foxhole, his Springfield .03 rifle wrapped in a poncho against the relentless tropical downpour. Around him, the remnants of Company C, 347th Infantry Regiment, held a position that military doctrine said was indefensible. 72 exhausted American soldiers against an estimated 800 Japanese troops preparing to overrun their position. Funk was 23 years old. Back home in Pennsylvania, the local draft board had initially rejected him twice. Too skinny, they said. Farm work doesn't prepare men for combat. His high school principal had written in his recommendation letter that Funk lacked the aggression necessary for military service. He was, in the principal's words, better suited for agricultural labor than warfare. What none of them knew, what the Japanese soldiers advancing through the rain that morning couldn't have imagined, was that this useless farm boy had spent his entire childhood developing skills that would make him one of the deadliest individual combatants in the Pacific War. Over the next 9 days, Leonard Funk would personally account for 113 confirmed Japanese kills, a shooting performance that would shatter every assumption about farm boys, small-town America, and what one man with a rifle could achieve when everything he knew about hunting white-tailed deer translated perfectly to combat. The transformation from rejected farm boy to legendary warrior began not on some training range, but in the hardwood forests of rural Pennsylvania. Leonard Funk had been born August 19, 1921, in Braddock Township, Allegheny County. His father operated a small dairy farm on marginal land that barely supported the family through the Depression years. By age 8, Leonard was hunting to supplement the family's meat supply. His father, a veteran of the First World War who never spoke about his service, taught his son one fundamental rule: every bullet costs money we don't have. You miss, the family doesn't eat. Make every shot count. The Springfield 1903 that Leonard learned on was a hand-me-down from his grandfather. The rifle, already 20 years old when Leonard first shouldered it, had a worn barrel that shot 2 inches left at 100 yards. Most shooters would have considered it worthless. Leonard learned to compensate, developing an instinctive understanding of trajectory, wind drift, and the subtle differences in how bullets flew in different weather conditions. His younger brother Robert later recalled in a 1987 interview Leonard could hit running rabbits at 75 yards. He'd estimate the lead, account for the wind, and drop them mid-stride. He wasted maybe 1 bullet in 50. Our father used to say Leonard thought in ballistics. The Depression-era necessity of making every shot count created shooting habits that formal military training could never replicate. Leonard learned to shoot from uncomfortable positions in bad weather with an imperfect weapon. He learned that the perfect shot often never came, that you took the good enough shot when it presented itself. Most critically, he learned to shoot without thinking, to let his subconscious handle the calculations while his conscious mind stayed focused on target acquisition. These skills, developed through thousands of hours pursuing game animals through Pennsylvania forests, would prove devastatingly effective against human targets. When Pearl Harbor was attacked on December 7, 1941, Leonard immediately attempted to enlist. The local draft board in Braddock Township rejected him. At 5 feet 9 inches and 142 pounds, he fell below the minimum weight requirement of 145 pounds for combat infantry. Leonard spent 3 months working double shifts at a local steel mill, forcing himself to eat extra portions he could barely afford. He gained exactly 4 pounds, reaching 146 pounds by his second enlistment attempt in March 1942. This time, he was accepted. His basic training at Camp Wheeler, Georgia, became legendary among his instructors. Sergeant William Harrison, his rifle instructor, later told Army historians, Funk qualified expert on his first range session, shooting a possible 240 out of 240. When I asked if he'd shot rifles before, he said since he was 8. Then he asked if we had ammunition he could buy for practice. I told him he didn't need practice. But Leonard did practice. He spent his limited free time on the ranges, often shooting with iron sights at distances the Army considered excessive for rifle qualification. He regularly hit man-sized targets at 600 yards, double the Army's standard engagement range. What separated Leonard from other expert marksmen wasn't just accuracy, but speed. He could fire the Springfield's 5-round magazine in under 6 seconds while maintaining center mass hits on moving targets. Most soldiers required 15 to 20 seconds for the same task. His drill instructors had never seen anything like it. The source of this speed lay in Leonard's hunting background. He'd learned to work the Springfield's bolt without conscious thought, to reload while tracking moving targets, to maintain sight picture through the recoil cycle. These were skills that couldn't be taught in the Army's 8-week rifle qualification course. They required the 10,000 hours Leonard had accumulated in Pennsylvania's woods. Despite his exceptional shooting, Leonard's company commander rated him as average in his fitness reports. The officer noted that Funk demonstrated excellent rifle skills, but questioned whether he possessed the aggressive mentality necessary for close combat. The report stated, "Soldier shows reluctance to engage in bayonet training, may lack the killer instinct required for infantry combat." This assessment would prove spectacularly wrong. The 347th Infantry Regiment shipped to the Pacific Theater in August 1943, arriving in New Guinea as part of the 87th Infantry Division. The division's mission was to conduct amphibious assaults against Japanese-held islands, preparing them for MacArthur's return to the Philippines. Leonard's first combat came on September 29, 1943, during the assault on Finschhafen, New Guinea. Company C landed under heavy fire, taking 30% casualties in the first hour. The company's officers were killed or wounded within minutes, leaving sergeants to lead scattered squads through dense jungle. Leonard found himself separated from his unit with 3 other soldiers, pinned down by a Japanese heavy machine gun position that had already killed a dozen Americans. According to the after-action report filed by the surviving members of his squad, what happened next established the pattern that would define Leonard's combat performance. Corporal James Mitchell, one of the 3 soldiers with Leonard that day, provided a detailed account in 1968. "We were stuck behind this fallen log, maybe 60 yards from the Japanese position. Every time someone raised their head, the machine gun would fire. We'd been pinned for maybe 20 minutes. Funk suddenly said he could take them. I told him he was crazy. The angle was impossible, mostly blocked by vegetation. Funk didn't argue. He just shifted position, braced the Springfield against a branch, and waited. We couldn't even see the machine gun through the jungle. Then the gun fired at someone else, giving away its position for maybe 2 seconds. Funk fired 3 times in rapid succession. The machine gun stopped. When we moved up, we found 3 dead Japanese, 2 gunners and an officer. Funk had put all 3 rounds through a gap in the vegetation, no wider than a dinner plate, hitting targets he'd identified purely by muzzle flash. This engagement established Leonard's reputation. Within days, whenever Company C encountered a difficult target, a sniper, a machine gun position, a fortified bunker, officers began specifically calling for Leonard. He became, in the unofficial terminology of the regiment, our designated problem solver. Between October 1943 and November 1944, Leonard participated in 7 major engagements across New Guinea and the Philippines. His confirmed kill count grew steadily: 12 kills at Finschhafen, 23 during the Huon Peninsula campaign, 31 at Sidor, 17 at Hollandia. But these numbers, impressive as they were, represented conventional combat over extended periods. What would happen over 9 days in November 1944 would be something entirely different, something that would force the U.S. Army to develop new statistical categories for individual combat effectiveness. If you're finding this story as incredible as I did when researching it, make sure you hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. We dive deep into untold stories of World War II that most history books overlook, bringing you the real accounts that shaped our world. Now let's get back to those 9 days that changed everything. The Battle of Leyte represented MacArthur's return to the Philippines. The operation involved 750 ships, 200,000 American troops, and 4 Army divisions conducting simultaneous amphibious assaults. The Japanese had prepared elaborate defenses, determined to make the Philippines America's Stalingrad. The 347th Infantry Regiment landed on White Beach on October 20th, 1944. Initial resistance was light, but as American forces pushed inland, Japanese resistance stiffened dramatically. By early November, the advance had stalled in the mountainous terrain of central Leyte. Hill 260, officially designated as Objective Dog on military maps, represented a critical terrain feature. Japanese forces had constructed elaborate defensive positions that dominated the surrounding area. 3 previous American attacks had failed with heavy casualties. Division headquarters assigned the mission to the 347th Infantry. November 15, 1944. Company C received orders to conduct a reconnaissance in force toward Hill 260. Intelligence estimated Japanese strength at 150 to 200 soldiers. The actual number exceeded 800. The company advanced through dense jungle in torrential rain. Visibility rarely exceeded 20 yards. At 1400 hours, the lead platoon walked into a carefully prepared ambush. Japanese machine guns and mortars opened fire from concealed positions, catching the Americans in a deadly crossfire. Company Commander Captain Michael Hargrove was killed in the first volley. The executive officer took command and ordered immediate withdrawal, but Japanese infantry had already moved to cut off escape routes. Company C found itself surrounded on 3 sides, with its back to a steep ravine. Leonard had been walking near the rear of the column when the ambush was sprung. As the company attempted to organize a defense, he moved forward toward the heaviest firing. Sergeant Thomas Bradley, who survived the battle, later described what he witnessed. Funk came up the trail like he was out for a walk. Bullets were snapping all around, but he just moved steady, scanning the jungle. He got to where I was and asked where the fire was coming from. I pointed to where we thought the Japanese positions were. Funk nodded, found a good spot behind a fallen tree, and started shooting. Over the next 4 hours, as Company C established a defensive perimeter, Leonard systematically eliminated Japanese crew-served weapons positions. His hunting instincts, refined over 15 years in Pennsylvania forests, translated perfectly to jungle warfare. He would watch for muzzle flashes, identify firing positions, then wait for the critical moment when Japanese gunners felt safe enough to expose themselves. A machine gunner reaching for an ammunition belt, a mortar crew loading rounds, an officer gesturing to subordinates. In these brief windows of opportunity, Leonard would fire. The Springfield '03 rifle, considered obsolete by 1944 standards, proved ideal for this work. Its powerful .30-06 cartridge could penetrate the vegetation that stopped lighter rounds. Its 5-round magazine forced Leonard to make every shot count, a discipline he'd learned as a child. Its bolt action, slower than semi-automatic rifles, was still faster than most soldiers could shoot when operated by someone with Leonard's skill. By nightfall on November 15th, Company C had stabilized its position. Japanese attacks throughout the night were repulsed. In the morning, when sergeants checked ammunition supplies, they discovered Leonard had fired 127 rounds during the previous day's fighting. Under normal circumstances, this would have resulted in a reprimand for excessive ammunition expenditure. The Army's expected ammunition consumption rate was 12 to 15 rounds per enemy killed. But when scouts moved forward to assess Japanese casualties in Company C's sector, they found something unprecedented. 43 dead Japanese soldiers, almost all killed by rifle fire, all within Leonard's field of fire. The mathematics worked out to 2.9 rounds per kill, the lowest ammunition expenditure ratio the division had ever recorded. This was just the first day. November 16th brought renewed Japanese attacks. Imperial Army commanders, recognizing Hill 260's strategic importance, committed elements of the 16th Division to overrun the American position. Attacks began at dawn, and continued throughout the day in waves of 50 to 100 soldiers. Leonard, positioned on the perimeter's most exposed sector, faced repeated banzai charges. Japanese doctrine relied on overwhelming American positions through sheer determination and numbers. Soldiers would advance screaming, firing from the hip, counting on speed and aggression to carry them through defensive fire. Against this tactic, Leonard's shooting style proved devastatingly effective. He didn't panic. He didn't fire wildly. He simply worked the Springfield's bolt and shot soldiers in order of threat priority. Officers first, then machine gunners, then grenadiers, then riflemen. He aimed for center mass, not attempting difficult headshots that might miss. His rhythm never varied. Acquire target, fire, cycle bolt, acquire next target. Private Robert Dennison, fighting in the adjacent position, later told military historians, "I've never seen anything like it. Japanese would come screaming out of the jungle, maybe 20 of them. Funk would start at one end of the line and just work across. Pop, 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 pop. Like he was shooting bottles off a fence. They'd get maybe 30 yards before the whole group was down. The psychological impact on Japanese forces was severe. Survivors reported to their commanders that the American position was defended by multiple snipers with automatic weapons. The idea that a single rifleman could produce such casualties seemed impossible. By evening of November 16th, Leonard had fired another 168 rounds. Post-battle casualty assessment credited him with 37 confirmed kills for the day, bringing his two-day total to 80 confirmed enemy killed. This matched or exceeded the total kills achieved by some infantry companies over weeks of combat. Division headquarters, receiving these reports, initially questioned their accuracy. The intelligence officer suspected clerical errors. A single soldier couldn't possibly achieve such numbers, but multiple witnesses confirmed the counts, and physical evidence, 80 dead Japanese in a narrow sector, all killed by rifle fire, supported the claim. November 17th through 21st brought continuous combat. Japanese commanders, refusing to accept that Hill 260 couldn't be taken, launched attack after attack. Leonard fought for 5 consecutive days with minimal sleep, often firing through the night at sounds and movements in the jungle. His rifle barrel became so hot from continuous firing that he learned to wet cloth and wrap it around the barrel between engagements to prevent warping. He went through 4 barrels during this period, each one shot out after approximately 500 rounds. Armorer reports noted the barrels showed wear patterns consistent with accurate fire, rather than spray and pray shooting that damaged most combat rifles. By November 21st, Leonard's confirmed kill count had reached 97. But he was also approaching physical limits. He'd had perhaps 6 hours of sleep total over 6 days. He'd lost 12 pounds due to inability to eat under constant combat stress. His hands trembled from exhaustion. Medical officers wanted to evacuate him for rest, but Leonard refused. In a letter home written months later, he explained his reasoning. "The guys around me knew I could shoot. If I left, they'd worry that their flank was exposed. I couldn't do that to them. So I stayed." November 22nd brought the heaviest Japanese attacks yet. Intelligence later determined that elements of 3 separate Japanese regiments, over 2,000 soldiers, were committed to taking Hill 260. The attacks came in coordinated waves from multiple directions, designed to overwhelm American defenses through sheer numbers. Leonard's sector faced repeated assault throughout the day. His ammunition expenditure reached 240 rounds, the highest single-day total of the battle. Witnesses reported that he occasionally fired so rapidly that Japanese soldiers were falling before others realized they were under fire. Sergeant Bradley recalled, "Late in the afternoon, maybe 50 Japanese came at us in a banzai charge. They got close, maybe 25 yards. Most of us were fixing bayonets, preparing for hand-to-hand. Funk just kept shooting. He fired the Springfield until the barrel was too hot to touch, then grabbed a carbine from a wounded man and kept firing. When it was over, there were 36 bodies in front of his position. He'd stopped an entire platoon by himself. That evening, as attacks finally ceased, Leonard collapsed. Medical personnel found him unconscious in his foxhole, his rifle still in firing position, his hands locked on the weapon in death grip that took several minutes to release. He was evacuated to a battalion aid station where doctors diagnosed severe exhaustion, dehydration, and early stages of combat fatigue. The final count from 9 days of combat was submitted to division headquarters on November 24th. 113 confirmed enemy killed, attributed to Private First Class Leonard Funk. The number was unprecedented. It exceeded the confirmed kill counts of some entire companies during comparable time periods. Historians and military analysts have spent decades trying to understand how one man achieved such extraordinary combat effectiveness. The answers lie in a unique combination of factors that merged farm boy skills with perfect tactical circumstances. First, Leonard's childhood hunting created neural pathways for shooting that most soldiers never develop. Neuroscience research conducted decades later would show that expert marksmen develop unique brain structures that allow subconscious processing of ballistic calculations. Leonard's 10,000 hours of hunting created these structures long before he entered combat. Second, the Springfield '03 rifle, though obsolete by 1944 standards, perfectly matched Leonard's skills. He'd learned to shoot with this exact weapon, knew its characteristics intimately, and could operate it at speeds that approached semi-automatic rifle performance. Newer M1 Garand rifles issued to other soldiers didn't provide Leonard any advantage because he'd already maximized the Springfield's potential. Third, the tactical situation at Hill 260 created target-rich environment with clear fields of fire. Japanese attacks followed predictable patterns, allowing Leonard to anticipate enemy movements. The jungle vegetation that concealed Japanese positions also channeled their attacks along limited avenues, concentrating targets in Leonard's engagement zones. Fourth, Leonard's psychological makeup proved ideally suited for sustained combat. Medical evaluations conducted after the battle noted his unusual ability to maintain emotional equilibrium under stress. Unlike most soldiers who experienced increasing anxiety with prolonged combat, Leonard reported feeling calmer as battles continued. This trait, rare among combatants, allowed him to maintain shooting precision even as exhaustion degraded his physical performance. But perhaps most importantly, Leonard had the right mindset. He didn't view combat as killing people. He approached each engagement as a problem-solving exercise. Where most soldiers became emotionally overwhelmed by combat's human cost, Leonard compartmentalized. Japanese soldiers became targets, no different from the deer he'd hunted in Pennsylvania. This psychological distance, potentially problematic in civilian life, proved essential for his combat effectiveness. The Japanese response to Leonard's performance revealed their own assessment of his impact. Intercepted radio communications from the 16th Division mentioned the American sniper so frequently that intelligence officers initially believed Company C's position was defended by a dedicated sniper unit. One captured Japanese officer, interrogated on November the 28th, provided detailed testimony about the battle's psychological impact. We were told the American position was lightly held and would fall to determined attack. Instead, we lost entire squads to single-shot rifle fire. The shooting was impossibly accurate. Soldiers believed they faced a ghost who could see through jungle and strike without warning. This is a perfect moment to pause and ask you to subscribe if you haven't already. These detailed historical accounts take extensive research, and your subscription helps us continue bringing these incredible, untold stories to light. Hit that subscribe button and the notification bell so you never miss stories like Leonard's. Now let's see what happened to our farm boy hero after those 9 incredible days. Leonard received the Distinguished Service Cross, America's second highest military decoration, for his actions at Hill 260. The recommendation, written by his battalion commander, noted Private First Class Funk's extraordinary rifle marksmanship and determined defense resulted in 113 confirmed enemy killed over 9 days of continuous combat. His actions prevented the enemy from overwhelming American positions and contributed materially to the successful defense of critical terrain. But the awards ceremony, conducted 3 weeks after the battle, revealed the psychological toll. Photographs show Leonard receiving his medal from General Walter Kruger, commander of 6th Army. In the images, Leonard appears gaunt, his uniform hanging loose on a frame that had lost additional weight. His eyes, according to witnesses, showed what would later be recognized as thousand-yard stare. Leonard was granted 2 weeks' leave in Australia for rest and recovery. Medical evaluations showed he developed what doctors termed combat exhaustion, experiencing nightmares, hypervigilance, and emotional numbing. Modern mental health professionals reviewing these records have diagnosed clear post-traumatic stress disorder symptoms. Despite his condition, Leonard refused extended medical evacuation. In letters home, he explained that his company was short of experienced soldiers, and he felt obligated to return. His brother Robert preserved these letters, donating them to the Army Heritage and Education Center in 1998. One letter, dated December 22, 1944, is particularly revealing. "I know what I did at Hill 260. I know how many men I killed. When I'm alone, I see their faces. But when I'm with the company, when we're in combat, I only see targets. I think that's how I have to be now. I don't know if I can be different when I come home." Leonard returned to Company C in January 1945. The unit participated in the liberation of Manila and subsequent operations in Luzon. His confirmed kill count continued growing, though never again matching the intensity of Hill 260. By war's end, his total confirmed kills exceeded 230, making him one of the deadliest individual combatants in the Pacific Theater. Comparative analysis puts Leonard's achievement in perspective. The Marine Corps' most successful sniper in the Pacific, John Fulcher, achieved 114 confirmed kills over 3 years of combat. Leonard achieved essentially the same total in 9 days, then added another 120 over the following 9 months. Soviet sniper Vasily Zaitsev, made famous by the movie Enemy at the Gates, achieved 242 confirmed kills over the entire war. Leonard, fighting for less than 2 years, came remarkably close to this total while receiving none of the recognition or publicity given to other famous snipers. The reason for this relative obscurity is complex. Unlike dedicated snipers who used specialized equipment and received specific missions, Leonard was an infantry rifleman who happened to be exceptionally skilled. The Army didn't have a framework for understanding or publicizing soldiers like him. He didn't fit neat categories. Additionally, Leonard's personality contributed to his anonymity. He refused interview requests, didn't write memoirs, and rarely discussed his combat experiences. When approached by military historians in the 1960s, he declined participation, stating simply that he'd done his duty and saw no reason to discuss it further. After Japan's surrender on August 15, 1945, Leonard returned to Pennsylvania. He married his childhood sweetheart, Catherine Wilson, on November 3, 1945. They purchased a small farm in Braddock Township, not far from where Leonard had grown up. Leonard returned to farming, raising dairy cattle and crops. Neighbors reported he was quiet, hard-working, and rarely mentioned his military service. He attended church regularly, participated in local veterans organizations, and lived what appeared to be an unremarkable life. But those closest to him saw the scars. His wife Catherine told their daughter Sarah in the 1980s that Leonard suffered nightmares throughout their marriage. He would wake screaming, convinced he was back at Hill 260. He couldn't attend fireworks displays because the sounds triggered panic attacks. He refused to hunt, telling Catherine that he'd done enough killing for one lifetime. Leonard rarely spoke about the war, but occasional glimpses emerged. His son Thomas, interviewed in 2006, recalled one revealing conversation. "I was maybe 10 years old, complaining about having to do target practice with my BB gun. Dad told me that shooting was a skill that might save my life someday. Then he got quiet and said that skills could be blessings or curses, depending on how you had to use them. I didn't understand until years later the farm prospered modestly. Leonard proved as skilled at agriculture as he'd been at combat, though in peaceful ways. He pioneered several innovations in dairy farming, served on the county agricultural board, and mentored young farmers. His community knew him as a successful farmer, good neighbor, and devoted family man. The fact that he'd killed more than 200 men was rarely discussed. In 1968, a young military historian named David Henderson tracked Leonard down, hoping to interview him for a book about riflemen in the Pacific War. Leonard initially refused, but eventually agreed to one meeting if Henderson promised not to publish anything during Leonard's lifetime. Henderson's notes from that interview, now archived at the Army Heritage Center, provide rare insight into Leonard's thoughts about his combat experience. When asked about Hill 260, Leonard was direct. "I did what was necessary. Those Japanese soldiers would have killed every man in my company if someone hadn't stopped them. I had skills that let me stop them. I don't take pride in it, but I don't feel guilty either. War makes people do things that would be monstrous in any other context. The morality isn't in the killing. It's in why you're there in the first place." Henderson asked about Leonard's shooting techniques. Leonard explained, "Shooting men isn't that different from hunting. You wait for the right moment, you take the shot, you move on to the next target. The only difference is that men shoot back, but by the time they're shooting at you, you should already be shooting at them. Speed matters more than perfect accuracy. A good shot now beats a perfect shot 2 seconds from now." When asked about being called a useless farm boy, Leonard laughed. "It's funny how people judge capability. Those men who said I wasn't fit for combat, they thought combat meant being tough and mean. They didn't understand that combat is mostly about skills, shooting, moving, thinking clearly when you're terrified. My farm boy skills turned out to be exactly what was needed. The joke was on them." Leonard Funk died on March 7, 1992 at age 70. His obituary in the local newspaper mentioned his military service in a single sentence. The funeral was attended by over 300 people, mostly farming families who knew him as a neighbor and mentor. Only a handful of aging veterans understood the significance of his combat achievements. His Distinguished Service Cross and other decorations were donated to the Army Heritage and Education Center. The accompanying documentation includes letters from soldiers who served with him, all testifying to his extraordinary abilities and his personal modesty. One letter, from Sergeant Thomas Bradley, who witnessed Leonard's performance at Hill 260, concluded with this assessment: "Funk was the best rifleman I ever saw, and I saw a lot of men shoot during the war. But more than that, he was a good man who did terrible things, because good men sometimes have to. He never bragged, never gloried in what he'd done. He just did his job and came home. That's the kind of hero most people never recognize." Military analysts examining Leonard's performance have identified several lessons relevant to modern warfare. First, individual skill still matters. Despite technology's advancement, combat ultimately involves humans making decisions under stress. Leonard's childhood training created capabilities that no boot camp could replicate in weeks or months. Second, unconventional backgrounds can produce exceptional soldiers. The farm boy that draft boards initially rejected proved more combat effective than soldiers from supposedly superior backgrounds. Military recruiting should look for transferable skills rather than stereotypical soldier characteristics. Third, weapon familiarity matters more than weapon modernity. Leonard's mastery of the Springfield 03 made it more effective in his hands than newer rifles would have been. This suggests that soldiers should train extensively with whatever weapons they'll actually use in combat, rather than constantly pursuing technological upgrades. Fourth, psychological factors determine combat effectiveness as much as physical capabilities. Leonard's ability to compartmentalize, to view combat as problem-solving rather than human conflict, enabled sustained performance that would have broken most soldiers. Understanding and developing these psychological skills should be part of military training. The story of Leonard Funk The useless farm boy who killed 113 Japanese in 9 days challenges comfortable assumptions about heroes and warfare. He wasn't larger than life. He was 5 feet 9 inches, 146 pounds, quiet and unassuming. He didn't seek glory or recognition. He didn't view himself as special. Yet this ordinary man achieved extraordinary results through the convergence of childhood skills, tactical opportunity, and psychological resilience. His story demonstrates that heroes often emerge from unexpected places, that the rejected and underestimated can prove most capable when circumstances demand action. More profoundly, Leonard's story illustrates warfare's human cost. He achieved remarkable combat success, saved countless American lives through his marksmanship, and earned justified recognition for his actions. But he also carried psychological wounds that never fully healed, killed over 200 men in acts that haunted him throughout his life, and struggled to reconcile his combat self with his civilian identity. Modern veterans reading Leonard's story often recognize familiar themes: the disconnect between combat effectiveness and civilian identity, the challenge of processing violence committed in military service, the difficulty of explaining combat experiences to those who haven't served. Leonard's struggles mirror those of countless veterans across all wars. His solution, returning to farming, building a quiet life, rarely discussing his experiences, represents one approach to post-combat adjustment. Whether it was healthy is debatable. Modern veteran services would likely encourage more active processing of combat trauma. But Leonard found peace in his own way, building a meaningful life even while carrying invisible scars. The physical evidence of Leonard's performance remains archived and documented. His service record, after-action reports, witness statements, and casualty assessments all confirm the basic facts. 113 confirmed enemy killed in 9 days at Hill to 60. Over 200 total confirmed kills during his service. Distinguished Service Cross recipient, expert marksman who changed combat outcomes through individual skill. But numbers alone cannot capture the full story. Behind each statistic was a human being, Japanese soldiers who died far from home, fighting for their emperor. American soldiers who lived because Leonard's rifle protected them. A Pennsylvania farm boy who discovered he possessed a terrible gift for killing. A veteran who spent 47 years processing what he'd done in 9 days. The question of whether Leonard Funk was a hero has no simple answer. He performed extraordinarily under combat conditions, saved American lives, and served his country with distinction. By conventional measures, he was unquestionably heroic, but Leonard himself seemed ambivalent about that assessment, viewing his actions as necessary rather than noble, practical rather than heroic. Perhaps the most honest assessment comes from his daughter Sarah, who spoke at a veterans event in 2010. My father was a man who possessed extraordinary skills and found himself in a situation where those skills were desperately needed. He used them effectively, which makes him competent. He volunteered for that situation rather than avoiding it, which makes him courageous. He carried the burden of what he'd done without becoming bitter or broken, which makes him strong. Whether all that adds up to hero is for others to judge. He would have said he was just doing his job. Today, Hill 260 is unmarked and largely forgotten. The battlefield, once drenched in blood and echoing with gunfire, has returned to jungle. Philippine farmers cultivate nearby lands, probably unaware of what happened there in November 1944. There are no monuments, no markers, no physical reminders of 9 days when one man's rifle decided a battle's outcome. But in military history, in the memories of families whose grandfathers served with Leonard Funk, in the archives where his incredible performance is documented, the story persists. The useless farm boy whom everyone underestimated proved that ordinary people can achieve extraordinary things when circumstances demand it. His story reminds us that capability cannot be judged by appearance, that skills developed in peaceful pursuits sometimes translate to wartime necessities that the rejected and dismissed sometimes prove most valuable. It also reminds us that warfare's human cost persists long after battles end, that killing enemies still means ending human lives, that combat effectiveness and psychological health don't always align. Leonard Funk, the farm boy who became one of World War II's deadliest riflemen, lived and died as a humble man who happened to possess extraordinary abilities. He used those abilities when his country needed them, carried the burden of their use throughout his life, and ultimately found peace in returning to the simple farming life where his skills were first developed. He never sought recognition, rarely discussed his achievements, and probably would have been horrified by the idea of videos documenting his combat performance. But his story deserves telling because it illuminates universal truths about capability, courage, and the human experience of warfare. They called him a useless farm boy. He proved them catastrophically wrong, then went back to being a farmer. In that journey from rejection to recognition to quiet retirement lies a quintessentially American story of unexpected heroes rising when needed, then returning to ordinary life when crisis passes. 113 confirmed kills in 9 days remains one of the most extraordinary individual combat performances in military history. But perhaps Leonard Funk's greatest achievement wasn't his marksmanship at Hill 260. Perhaps it was his ability to commit extraordinary violence when necessary, then return to peaceful life without losing his humanity. That balance, that ability to be deadly when required but gentle by preference, defines the citizen soldier ideal that Leonard embodied perfectly. The useless farm boy, who everyone underestimated, became exactly what America needed, when it needed it most. Then quietly returned to being exactly what he'd always been, a Pennsylvania farmer who happened to be the deadliest rifleman of his generation.